As a geologist at the Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology, I am inspired by my colleagues, present and past, who have studied the journal entries of Lewis and Clark and the Corps of Discovery. It is fascinating how these more than 200-year-old observations relate to our current understanding of the frontier geology of Montana. Driven by curiosity and wonder, and aided by the Foundation for Montana History, I follow the descriptions of the intrepid Lewis and Clark and seek out the geologic marvels they found along their journey through the White Cliffs section of the Missouri River. Indeed, the Corps of Discovery were not the first peoples to interact with and attempt to understand these landscapes. However, their journals were the oldest written observational record of rock types and landforms to which we have access. In 1805, the science of geology was in its infancy, and therefore the Corps of Discovery had little to no training in the subject. That being said, while some of their interpretations do not stand the test of time, their core observations hold great value. On this trip, I canoe downriver and stay at Corps of Discovery camps in the White Cliffs section of the Upper Missouri River Breaks National Monument, with hopes to observe, understand, and explain the observations of Meriwether Lewis in the context of today's geologic paradigm. I welcome you on this magical journey.
The hills and river cliffs which we pass today exhibit a most romantic appearance. The bluffs of the river rise to a height of from 200 to 300 feet, and in most places nearly perpendicular. They are formed of remarkable white sandstone, which is sufficiently soft to give way readily to the impression of water. 2 or 3 thin horizontal strata of white free stone, on which the rains or water make no impression, lie embedded in these cliffs, or of soft stone near the upper part of them.
So we're up here at this pale white layer, and let's take a closer look at what it is. So it feels really sandy in my hand. And I take a close look and I can see little sand grains, just billions and billions of little sand grains. And imagine a shallow sea in Montana where we are now, and sand coming in rivers and wind blowing it into that ocean and depositing it. Think about being at the beach and into the shallow water as the sand is moving around and being deposited, and eventually it makes the sandstone. Oh man, this is incredible. All these little pockmarks in this sandstone, wind and water. I am climbing on ancient sand dunes from a sea, from an old beach. That's just incredible. All this texture, these layers, tens and tens of millions of years old, climbing to the top of this dune that was once under the sea. Oh yes, this is so cool.
The water, in the course of time, in descending from those hills and plains on either side of the river, has trickled down the soft sand cliffs and worn it into 1,000 grotesque figures, which, with the help of a little imagination and an oblique view at a distance, are made to represent elegant ranges of lofty freestone buildings, having their parapets well stocked with statuary.
So this is a hoodoo. I love hoodoos, because they take on the shape of, sometimes they look like people, sometimes they look like gargoyles and really neat things from fantasy novels. And Lewis and Clark were seeing these from the river and taking note of them. And so how does a hoodoo form? What processes do you need? Well, you need a more resistant layer that we call a caprock, and that's more resistant to erosion. So more resistant to wind and water and freeze-thaw of ice, breaking it down at the surface. And then the caprock is able to create a pillar of less resistant to erosion rock below it, creating these fanciful shapes that we call hoodoos.
The thin strata of hard freestone intermixed with the soft sandstone seems to have aided the water in forming this curious scenery. As we passed on, it seemed as if those scenes of visionary enchantment would never have an end. For here it is too that nature presents to the view of the traveler vast ranges of walls of tolerable workmanship. So perfect indeed are those walls that I should have thought the nature had attempted here to rival the human art of masonry had I not recollected that she had first began her work. These walls rise to the height of many places of 100 feet, are perpendicular with two regular faces, and are from 1 to 12 feet thick. Each wall retains the same thickness at top which it possesses at bottom. The stone of which these walls are formed is black, dense and durable, and appears to be composed of a large portion of earth intermixed or cemented with a small quantity of sand and a considerable portion of talc and quartz.
Wow, look at that. That's a dike right through the sandstone. That's spectacular. All the way up. Wow. Yeah, so this is a magma that was trying to make it to the surface. And in doing so, it comes up as a plane of material. So it's liquid, it's magma coming from deep, and it's making its way to the surface, and it's breaking its way through whatever was there. In this case, the sandstone cliffs all around are what was there. And this was coming up, and it froze within those cliffs. And I know that because it has crystals in it that I can see, igneous material that would crystallize from a magma. And we have what's called biotite mica, we have some amphibole in here. And when you have a rock with crystals throughout a finer grained, in this case gray matrix, we know that that crystallized close to the surface, but not at the surface. So this is just a beautiful textbook example of magma trying to make it to the surface and froze as a dike. So there's a green mineral in here called olivine. And that means it's from the Earth's mantle, from very deep in the Earth, and it came to the surface very quickly. I love olivine. It's my favorite mineral. This is the type of rock that just makes my day.
These walls pass the river in several places, rising from the water's edge much above the sandstone bluffs, which they seem to penetrate, thence continuing their course on a straight line on either side of the river through the gradually ascending plains, over which they tower to the height of from 10 to 70 feet until they reach the hills, which they finally enter and conceal themselves. These walls sometimes run parallel to each other, with several ranges near each other, and at other times intersecting each other at right angles, having the appearance of the walls of ancient houses or gardens. Columns of various sculpture, both grooved and plain, are also seen supporting long galleries in front of those buildings. In other places, on a much nearer approach, and with the help of less imagination, we see the remains or ruins of elegant buildings. Some columns standing in almost entire with their pedestals and capitals, others retaining their pedestals but deprived by time or accident of their capitals, some lying prostrate and broken, others in the form of vast pyramids of conic structure bearing a series of other pyramids on their tops, becoming less as they ascend and finally terminating in a sharp point.
This is a great spot to talk about the two different rock types that we're seeing here. The pale layer, the light-colored rock, it's flat-lying, is a sandstone, and that's billions and billions of grains of sand that were deposited in a shallow sea tens and tens of millions of years ago. The dark-colored rock, the vertical rock, is lava that came from the mantle of the earth, and it's squeezing itself, it's flowing up towards the surface vertically through that sandstone, and that happened tens and tens of millions of years after that sandstone was made into rock. So walking here right along the fin, going out to the end, and you can see again this sandstone, the white rock, pasted on the darker igneous rock, and the sandstone wouldn't be here. It erodes away more easily without this intrusion. So really neat spot to take a look, and let's see what's at the end. This hole in the wall formation is pretty amazing. I'm gonna see if I can get up there and take a look through at an extraordinary view of the Missouri River. What an amazing spot to think about geologic time. You had to lay down these sediments in an ancient sea, turn them into rock, and then that rock was there for the igneous material to intrude up through it and support it to make this fin. And then you eroded through that fin to make this hole in the rock. Incredible amount of geologic time. So this is a majestic view of the Missouri River, and we're floating down this river to see all these cool spots. I'm just imagining Lewis and Clark making their way up this river in 1805 and seeing the same things, them for the first time. Just amazing being here on the same river of Lewis and Clark in the Corps of Discovery in 1805 and reflecting on what they wrote in their journals. And as Lewis said, scenes of visionary enchantment. And now I get it, like I didn't before. But also, as a geologist, looking at their descriptions and their observations that they made of the rocks, of the different layering, the white sandstones, the black, robust materials, those observations hold true to today. And it's incredible that some 230 years ago, they were making these observations that we can use today to further our understanding of this incredible area. What a journey.